Let's do something fun, everybody. You know what it's time for? It's time for us to read some short story action. Now, we're going to give you a couple options here, and we're going to go with our Outer Limits theme, and this time we're going to get it right. It's time for the control voice for Fiction Friday, but we got to choose, okay? Think about this, horror or mystery? You let me know.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, Control Voice. Thank you, Outer Limits. By the way, the co-pilot is here. Are you going to read? You going to read, co-pilot? You want to read with me? Yeah, she loves being able to read mystery and horror, adventure, fish stories. She loves Moby Dick. She's constantly reading Moby Dick. I don't know what it is about the cat, and of course, he's not really a fish. But, okay, now we got a couple options. Can go with horror, and you can vote. Vote on X or vote in Rumble. You can go with horror, a couple really short ones. These are very short stories, okay? Or I picked up a set. Let me help out the co-pilot here. Again, hi co-pilot. She comes for BookTube. She loves BookTube. Totally into BookTube. Or we could go with a mystery story. I've got this set, Masterpieces of Mystery, selected by Ellery Queen. Whoa, nice. Good stuff. This is the golden age. Yes. Okay, fine. There you go. All right. So let's see. We got a few options here on stories. This is part 2 of the series, the golden age. As Shriekback might say, this is the golden age. So we have a few options here. Let's see. What do we want to read? We could do Ellery Queen in Mind Over Matter. We could do a story by, we could do a story by Anthony Berkeley called Roger Sheringham in Mr. Bierstow Says. We could also go with a story by David Fromm, otherwise known as Leslie Ford, called Even Pinkerton in The Man on the Iron Paling. So again, we have Mind Over Matter, Mr. Bierstone Says, or The Man on the Iron Palings. Those are mystery stories, okay? Those are a little longer. Or we could go horror, and we could choose. So what I'll do is we'll do a couple choices. You vote horror or mystery. We could go with Callahan's Coat by Donald R. Burleson. And I used to communicate with Don Burleson. He used to live in Nashville. He was a math professor. So that would be Callahan's Coat by Donald R. Burleson, which is a super short one. We could go with The Dread Book by Don Webb. So we've got Callahan's Coat by Don Burleson, or perhaps The Dread Book, because both of these are really short. So we can go horror if you want to. They're both super short, pretty compact. The other one's about 15 pages long, 16 pages long, a little bit longer on those other ones in the mystery. So you let me know. You want to go mystery, then we'll choose from the mystery stories. If you want to go horror, we'll choose and we'll do both horror. So I see Skunk Hollow says horror. Ah, yes, yes, yes. Okay. And over on X, let's see. Somebody's going to have to tell me what that 40 was. I wonder what the 40 means. Was it 40 acres and a mule? I don't know. Mystery, says Gray Wing. And JB Morrison's got to go to my mind is not for rent for any god or government. Yep. Thank you, Rush. No, my mind is not for rent to any god or government. I like the mystery, says Skunk Hollow. Okay. Let's mystery, says Skunk Hollow. Okay. All right, here we go. Going to go with the mystery. Now we've got to choose on the mystery stories. Let's see here. It's going to be a cold read, by the way. I just got this book. Let's see. We've got a 16-page story. No. Yeah, we have an 18-page story with Ellery Queen in Mind Over Matter. We have an 19-page story in Mr. Bierstow Says. And let's see, I'll throw one more in here. Oh, this could be a good one. The Assassin's Club. Let's go with The Assassin's Club. This is by Nicholas Blake. Nigel Strangeways is the main character. He's been in many, many stories. Nigel Strangeways in The Assassin's Club by Nicholas Blake. All right. Page 261. Ready? Here we go. This is cool. I've never read this. Let's see what happens. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Let's make sure everything's all set up for us. All right, good. We're good. Okay, co-pilot. All gone. All set. All set. All right. Sorry. All right. No, thought Nigel Strain. I'll start again. Sorry. It's okay. No, thought Nigel Strangeways, looking round the table. No one would ever guess. Ever since, a quarter of an hour ago, they had assembled in the anteroom for sherry, Nigel had been feeling more and more nervous, a nervousness greater than the prospect of having to make an after-dinner speech seemed to warrant. It was true that, as the guest of honor, something more than the usual post-prandial convivialities would be expected of him. And, of course, the company present would, from its nature, be especially critical. But still, he had done this sort of thing often enough before. He knew he was pretty good at it. Why the acute state of jitters, then? After it was all over, Nigel was tempted to substitute foreboding for jitters, to wonder whether he oughtn't to have proclaimed these very curious feelings like Cassandra from the housetop, even at the risk of spoiling what looked like being a real peach of a dinner party. After all, the dinner party did get spoiled anyway, and soon enough too. But taking all things into consideration, it probably wouldn't have made any difference. It was in an attempt to dispel this cloud of uneasiness that Nigel began to play with his own thoughts, the old game of identity guessing. There was a curious uniformity of the 20-odd diners. The women, there were only 3 of them, looked homely, humorous, dowdy, and be damned to it types. The men, Nigel finally decided, resembled in the mass sanitary inspectors resembled in the mass to be sanitary inspectors or very minor civil servants. They were, most of them, rather undersized and ran to drooping mustaches, gold-rimmed spectacles, and a general air of mild ineffectualness. There were exceptions, of course, that elderly man in the middle of the table with the face of a dyspeptic and superannuated bloodhound. It was not difficult to place him. Even without the top hat or the wig with which the public normally associated him, Lord Justice Pottinger could easily be recognized, and he was the most celebrated criminal judge of his generation. Then that leonine, mobile face on his left. It had been as much photographed as any society beauties, and well it might, for Sir Eldred Travers' golden tongue had he, and it was whispered he had saved many murderers, as Justice Pottinger had actually hanged, as many murderers as Justice Pottinger had hanged. There were one or two other exceptions, such as the dark-haired, poetic-looking young man sitting on Nigel's right and rolling bread pellets. "No," said Nigel aloud this time. "No one would possibly guess." "Guess what?" inquired the young woman. "The bloodthirsty character of this assembly." He took up the menu card, at the top of which was printed in red letters, "The Assassins. Dinner, December 20th. "No," laughed the young man. "We don't look like murderers, I must admit, not even murderers by proxy." "Good Lord! Are you in the trade too?" "Yes, I ought to have introduced myself. Name of Herbert Dale." Nigel looked at the young man with increased interest. Dale had published only 2 crime novels, but he was already accepted as one of the elite of detective writers. He could not otherwise have been a member of that most exclusive of clubs, the Assassins. For, apart from the representative of the bench, the bar, and Scotland Yard, this club was composed solely of the princes of detective fiction. It was at this point that Nigel observed 2 things: that the hand which incessantly rolled bread pellets was shaking, and that on the glossy surface of the menu card Dale had just laid down, there was a moist finger mark. "Are you making a speech too?" Nigel said. "Me? Oh, good Lord, no. Why?" "I thought you looked nervous," said Nigel in his direct way. The young man laughed, a little too loudly, and as though that was some kind of signal, one of those unrehearsed total silences then fell upon the company. Even in the street outside, the noises seemed to be dampened, as though an enormous soft pedal had been pressed down on everything. Nigel realized that it must have been snowing since he came in. A disagreeable sensation of eeriness momentarily crept over him. Annoyed with the sensation, for a detective has no right to feel psychic, he reflected on that angrily to himself. Not even a private detective so celebrated as Nigel Strangeways should feel that way. He forced himself to look round the brilliantly lighted room, the animated yet oddly neutral-looking faces of the diners, the maitre d' in his white gloves, bland and uncreased as his own face was bland and uncreased, and the impassive waiters. Everything was perfectly normal. And yet, some motive he was never after able satisfactorily to explain forced him to let drop into the yawning silence, "What a marvelous setting this would be for a murder." If Nigel had been looking in the right direction at that moment, things might have happened very differently. As it was, he didn't even notice the way Dale's wine glass suddenly tilted and spilt a few drops of sherry. At once, the whole table buzzed again with conversation. A man 3 paces away on Nigel's right raised his head, which had been almost buried in his soup plate, and said, "Tach! This is the one place where a murder would never happen. My respected colleagues are men of peace. I doubt if any of them has the guts to say boo to a goose. Oh, yes, they'd like to be men of action, tough guys. But I ask you, just look at them. That's why they became detective story writers. Wish fulfillment, the psychiatrists call it, though I don't give much for that gang either. But it's quite safe. Spilling blood, as long as you only spill blood on paper." The man turned his thick lips and small, arrogant eyes toward Nigel. The trouble with you amateur investigators is that you're so romantic. That's why the police beat you to it every time. A thick-set, swarthy man opposite him exclaimed, "You're wrong there, Carruthers. We don't seem to have beaten Mr. Strangeways to it in the past every time." "So, your aggressive friend is the David Carruthers?" "Well, well," whispered Nigel to Dale. "Yes," said Dale, not modifying his tone at all. "A squalid fellow, isn't he? But he gets the public. He understands them all right. We have sold our thousands, but David has sold his tens of thousands, David Carruthers. Got a yellow streak through, I'll bet, in spite of his bluster. Pity somebody doesn't bump him off at this table just to show him that he's not the Mr. Infallible he sets himself up to be with his money." Carruthers shot a vicious glance at Dale. "Why not try it yourself? Get you a bit of notoriety anyway. Might even sell your books. Though," he continued, clapping on the shoulder a nondescript little man who was sitting between him and Dale, "I think little Crippen here would be my first bet. You'd like to have my blood, Crippen, wouldn't you?" The little man said stiffly, "Don't make yourself ridiculous, Carruthers. You must be drunk already. And I'd thank you to remember that my name is Cripps." At this point, the president interposed with a convulsive change of subject, and the dinner resumed its even tenor. While they were disposing of some very tolerable trout, a waiter informed Dale that he was wanted on the telephone. The young man went out. Nigel was trying at the same time to listen to a highly involved story of the president's and trying to decipher the various curious expressions on small Mr. Cripps' face when all the lights went out. There were a few seconds of astonished silence. Then a torrent of talk broke out, the kind of forced jocularity with which men still comfort themselves in the face of sudden darkness. Nigel could hear movement all around him, the pushing back of chairs, quick, muffled treads on the carpet, waiters, no doubt, moving about. Someone at the end of the table, rather ridiculously, struck a match. It did nothing but emphasize the rest of the pitch darkness. "Stevens, can't someone light the candles?" exclaimed the president irritably. "Excuse me, sir," said the voice of the maitre d'. "There are no candles. Harry, run along to the fuse box and find out what's gone wrong." The door banged behind the waiter. Less than a minute later, the lights all blazed again. Blinking, like swimmers come up from a deep dive, the diners looked at each other. Nigel observed that Carruthers' face was even nearer his food than previous. Curious to go on eating in the dark, but no, his head was right on top of the food, lying in the plate, like John the Baptist's. And from between his shoulder blades, there stood out a big white handle. The handle, good God, it couldn't be. This was too macabre altogether, but it was the handle of a fish slice. A kind of gobbling noise came out of Justice Pottinger's mouth. All eyes turned to where his shaking hand pointed, his fingers growing wide with horror, their eyes growing wider, and then he turned ludicrously back, and they turned to him, as though he was about to direct a jury. "God bless my soul," was all the judge could say. But someone had sized up the whole situation. The thick-set man who had been sitting opposite Carruthers was already standing with his back to the door. His voice snapped. "Stay where you are, everyone. I'm afraid there's no doubt about this. I must take charge of this case at once. Mr. Strangeways, will you go and ring up Scotland Yard? Police surgeon, fingerprint men, photographers, the whole bag of tricks. You know what we want." Well, Nigel Strangeways sprang up, his gaze roving around the room, and registered something different, some detail missing. But his mind could not quite identify it. Perhaps it would come to him later. He moved towards the door, and just then the door opened brusquely, pushing the thick-set man away from it. There was a general gasp, as though everyone expected to see someone walk in with blood on his hands. It was only young Dale, a little white in the face, but grinning amiably. "What on earth?" he began. And then he understood. An hour later, Nigel Strangeways and the thick-set man, Superintendent Bateman, were alone in the anteroom. The princes of detective fiction were huddled together in another room, talking in shocked whispers. "Don't like the real thing, do they, sir?" the superintendent had commented sardonically. "Do 'em good to be up against a flesh-and-blood problem for once. I wish 'em luck with it." "Well," he was saying now, "doesn't seem like much of a loss to the world, this Carruthers. None of 'em got a good word for 'em. Too much food, too much drink, too many women. But that doesn't give us a motive. Now this, Cripps. Carruthers said Cripps would like to have his blood. Why was that?" "You can search me for the reason. Cripps wasn't giving anything away when we interviewed him earlier. Well, he had enough opportunity. All he had to do when the lights went out was to step over to the buffet, take up the first knife he laid hands on, probably thought the fish slice was a carving knife, stab him, and sit down and twiddle his fingers." "Yes, he could have wrapped his handkerchief around the handle. That would account for there being no fingerprints, and there's no one to swear he moved from his seat. Dale was out of the room, and it's a bit late now to ask Carruthers who was on the other side, but if he did do it, everything happened luckily for him." "Well, then there's young Dale himself," said Bateman, biting the side of his thumb. "Talked a lot of hot air about bumping Carruthers off before it happened. Might be a doable bluff. You see, Mr. Strangeways, there's no doubt about the waiter's evidence. The main switch was thrown over. Now, what about this? Dale arranged to be called up during dinner. He answers the call, then goes and turns off the main switch. In gloves, I suppose, because there's only the waiter's fingerprints on it. Comes back under cover of darkness, stabs this man, and goes out again." Ruminated Nigel. Strangeways thought about it. "But what about the motive? And where are the gloves? And why, if it was premeditated, such an outlandish weapon?" "If he's hidden the gloves, we'll find him soon enough." And the superintendent was interrupted by the tinkle of the telephone at his elbow. A brief dialogue ensued. Then he turned to Nigel Strangeways. "Man I sent round to interview Morton, a bloke who rang Dale up at dinner time. He swears he was talking to Dale for 3 to 5 minutes. That seems to let Dale out, unless it was collusion." That moment, a plainclothes man entered, a grin of ill-conceived triumph on his face. He handed a rolled-up pair of black kid gloves to Bateman. "Tucked away behind the pipes in the lavatory, sir." Bateman unrolled them. There were stains on the fingers. He glanced inside the wrists, then passed the gloves to Nigel, pointing at some initials stamped there. "Well, well," said Nigel. "H.D. Let's have him in again. Looks as if that telephone call was collusion." "Yes, we've got him now." But when the young man entered and saw the gloves lying on the table, his reactions were very different from what the superintendent had expected. An expression of relief, instead of the spasm of guilt, passed over his face. "Oh, stupid of me," he said. "I lost my head for a few minutes after, but I'd better start at the beginning. Carruthers was always bragging about his nerve and his tight corners he'd been in and so on. So tough. He was a poisonous specimen. So Morton and I decided to play a practical joke on him. He was to phone me up. I was to go out and throw the main switch, then come back and pretend to strangle Carruthers from behind. Just give him a thorough shaking up and leave a blood-curdling message on his plate to the effect that this was just a warning. The next time the unknown would do the thing properly. We reckoned he'd be gibbering with fright when I turned up the lights again, well, everything went all right till I came up behind him. But then I happened to touch that knife, and I knew somebody had been there before me in earnest. Afraid I lost my nerve then, especially when I found I'd got some of his blood on my gloves. So I hid them and burnt the spoof message. Damn silly of me. The whole idea was damn silly. I can see that now. Why gloves at all? Said Nigel. Well, they say it's your hands and your shirt front that are likely to show in the dark. So I put on black gloves and pinned my coat over my shirt front. And I say, he added in a depreciating way, I don't want to teach you fellows your business, but if I had really meant to kill him, would I have worn gloves with my initials on them? That is as may be, said Superintendent Bateman coldly, but I must warn you that you are in— Just a minute, Nigel interrupted. Why should Cripps have wanted Carruthers' blood? Oh, you'd better ask Cripps. If he won't tell you, I don't think I ought to. Don't be a fool. You're in a damn tight place, and you can't afford to be chivalrous. Very well. Little Cripps may be dim, but he's a good sort. He told me once in confidence that Carruthers had pirated an idea of his for a plot that made a bestseller out of it. I saw it as a rotten thing to do as well, but dash it, no one would commit murder just because— You must leave that for us to decide, Mr. Dale, said the superintendent. When the young man had gone out, under the close surveillance of a constable, Bateman turned wearily to Nigel. Well, he said, it may be him, and it may be Cripps, but with all these crime authors about, it might be any of them. Nigel leapt up from his seat. Yes, he exclaimed, and that's why we've not thought of anyone else. And, his eyes lit up, by Jove, now I've remembered it. The missing detail. Quick, are all those waiters and chaps still there? Yes, we've kept them in the dining room, but what the— Nigel ran into the dining room, Bateman at his heels. He looked out of one of the windows, open at the top. What's down below there? He asked the maitre d'. A yard, sir. The kitchen windows. Look out onto it. And now, where was Sir Eldred Travers sitting? The man pointed to the place without hesitation, his imperturbable face betraying not the least surprise. Right. Will you go and ask him to step this way for a minute? Oh, by the way, he added, as the maitre d' reached the door. Where are your gloves? The man's eyes flickered. My gloves, sir? Yes. Before the lights went out, you were wearing white gloves. After they went up again, I remembered it just now. You were not wearing them. Are they in the yard, by any chance? The man shot a desperate glance around him. Then the bland composure on his face began to shatter. He collapsed, sobbing, into a chair. My daughter. He ruined her. She killed herself. When the lights went out, it was too much for me, the opportunity. He deserved it. I'm not sorry. Yes, said Nigel 10 minutes later. It was too much for him. He picked up the first weapon at hand. Afterwards, knowing everyone would be searched, he had to throw the gloves out the window. There would be blood on them. With luck, we might not have looked in the yard before he could get out to remove them. And unless one was looking, one wouldn't see them against the snow. They were white. What was that about Sir Eldred Travers? Asked the superintendent. Oh, I wanted to put him off his guard, and to get him away from the window. He might have tried to follow his gloves. Well, that fish slice might have been a slice of bad luck for young Dale if you hadn't been here, said the superintendent, venturing a witticism. What are you grinning at about? I was just thinking, this might be the first time that a judge has actually been present at a murder. Oh, all right. That was okay. That was, again, the Assassin's Club featuring the character Nigel Strangeways. And that was written by Nicholas Blake. Now, I don't know much about Nicholas Blake. It first appeared in 1945 by Nicholas Blake. It has the company, the Harold Matson Company, but I don't know if it's in a magazine or not. I'll have to look that up. Interesting. It was okay, just simple, very simple. Let me give you one more. We'll give you one of these horror stories here. I'm going to give you a quick horror story. These are super short. Let's see what this one's like. Okay. Let's go with... Boy, there's so many good ones in here. All right. Callahan's Coat by Donald Burleson. Fellow New Hampshireite, passed away a few years ago. Donald Burleson, Callahan's Coat. The night exploded in a clap of thunder, and the lights went dark. Mary, absurdly, was left holding her book in the dark. She reclined her head on the cushion and tried to relax in the padded expanse of her chair, hoping that the power would come on. But for now, the darkness was almost palpable, a mass of shadow. Callahan would have been up seeing to things, lighting an oil lantern. She didn't even know where the lantern was. At least he had been good about those things. If only he hadn't been the way he was. If only he hadn't made her so afraid of him. To this day, his influence, his unhappy memory, seemed at times to linger in the house. Callahan. That's how she thought of him even now, after all these years since his death. Not Jeremiah, not Jerry, just Callahan. She had taken the name in marriage, but it had sat poorly upon her, like an ill-fitting coat. Outside, the thunder muttered on, and a moaning wind touched the brittle window panes with blind, cold fingers of rain. The coat, of course, the big old brown overcoat, that was why she was thinking about these things. She had found it in the basement closet just this morning, maybe the last real remnant of him, and she had left it on the little table beside the cellar door to remind herself to put it out with the trash on Tuesday. The inside lining was badly shredded, and the whole garment reeked of old cigar smoke and other odors, as well as mildew now. She couldn't imagine anyone else wanting to wear it. Near her, the wind rustled the curtains, and she realized that she ought to close the window, but somehow she didn't want to get up out of the chair in the dark. Though she couldn't see a thing, she knew that the saucer with the candle was still on the little lampstand beside her, and she felt around for it, fumbling then with paper matches. But before she could light the candle, a fitful little gust of wind snuffed out the tiny flame of the match, and she sighed and sat back and tried to accept the darkness. But in that moment, when the match had flared, what was the impression she had gotten? Something had been different. Something had been wrong. She sat very still and listened, but heard only the pattering of the rain and the grumbling of thunder. No, there was something else. A sound like something soft passing over the carpet, out there in front of her somewhere. As she leaned forward to catch the sound, it stopped. Maybe she had just imagined it. But when the lightning at that moment illuminated the room, she saw what she saw. Someone was in the room with her. She felt her whole body turn cold, and she tried not to move. Maybe whoever it was wouldn't see her, wouldn't know she was here. When the lightning flashed again, she peered out into the room before her. The illumination faded as quickly as it had come, but the impression remained. It was, she thought at first, a child, a gnome-like figure standing there in the dark, humped and dwarfish. But she had to accept what her mind insisted was actually the truth of the matter. What was standing there was the coat. She tried to draw a deep breath to calm herself, but couldn't get it down the tightness of her throat. The darkness was so dense, so heavy, that it seemed to press upon her like a shroud, and the thunder mumbled on in its endless litany, and the rain drummed at the windows. And out in front of her, something was moving again. A quick flash of lightning played over the room. It was the coat, and it was closer now. Merciful heaven, this couldn't be. She felt as if her heart would stop, and now, playing on the lightless air, was a medley of odors whose nature she didn't want to contemplate. There wasn't time, anyway. When the lightning flashed once more, it told her what she already knew. The arms of the great brown coat, though rounded in the air, could not have contained anything of substance. But that didn't keep them from reaching out to her. That's a good one. Good job, Don Burleson. That's cool. The only thing I would add to that, if Don Burleson were around, I would say what would be cool is if at the end she could sense the smell, somehow the smell of dried blood or something like that. Something, the smell of blood, not yet dry or something, something like that. That would be pretty cool. That's a good one from Don Burleson. As I mentioned, Don Burleson actually moved to like the Southwest. He got really interested in like Area 51 and alien stuff, and I actually wrote a book that sort of combined Indian lore with like the presence of aliens and stuff like that, making some of the mythology of the Southwestern Indians fit with possible alien visitation and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty good thing. And I still remember the scenes that he wrote out there in the mesas in the moonlight. Very, very vivid descriptions. You can tell he's really good at his descriptions, does a really good job there, especially the pacing of that. That other story, it's just formulaic, really. It probably comes from like the 1800s when that sort of thing was acceptable to people, I suppose. But okay, now I want to give you an update on Tower and see what you think here. Let me show you. Now, if you're not familiar with the story Tower, then let me give you a quick update. It's about a man and woman, Paul and Caroline, who worked for the Vermont Forestry Department in 1960. And they have to go check up on this fire tower that used to be on a hill in a really tiny town out in the middle of nowhere called Frenton in Vermont. And they have to leave the nearest towns like an hour away, and they go in their Jeep, and they have to enter through this forest and this gated like old dirt road thing. And they pass through the gate. The gate hasn't been opened. Whole place is supposed to be fenced off. Nobody's supposed to go in because this town was flooded out. It was taken by eminent domain decades before, and it was flooded out to create a reservoir. So it's drinking water, and nobody uses the fire tower anymore. So it's just derelict. It's been empty there for years, but they are required to go and check and make sure everything's locked up for the winter. And it's like late November. It's getting cold. And so they take their canoe off the Jeep. They leave the Jeep there, and they take the canoe across. There's no trees, nothing except just some scrubby bushes, barbed wire around the tower. And they find that the place actually has been broken into. There's some graffiti on the wall. There's no electricity, power, no bathrooms, nothing. It's just a metal tower. And also around the barbed wire that goes around the perimeter of the island are these little black ribbons. They look like scorpions. They've been sort of folded to look like scorpions. Very strange. And so they they go inside, and a big wind squall, snow squall thing comes up, and the canoe gets blown way, way offshore, and the water's really cold. And Paul tries to go get the canoe. He can't pull it up. Something's caught underneath in one of the lines, and he can't get it out. And so she swims out to rescue him because he's starting to get hypothermia. She's able to get him in, and he's very cold during the night. She helps him survive, and they're talking, and he says, well, it's okay. We'll be here. It's Friday. We'll probably be, they'll probably come for us once they realize we haven't come back. We just have to wait till Monday when they get back to work. He said, no, I actually didn't sign the Jeep out when I took it from the office. He's like, oh no. So they have some provisions, some snacks that were in his bag and stuff like that. And his trouble with the cold, that was really tough, but she was able to save him. And so then they go out and they try to get some food, try to start a fire inside. They make like a little fireplace out of a couple filing cabinets that are sort of angled towards a piece of a broken window, so the smoke might go out the window. And they bring in pieces of the bushes. There's not much. And there are a bunch more snow squalls, really, really cold. And they try to get help. They put SOS out in the rocks. And they go to fish. They go to get some fish. They dig up some worms, and Paul ends up getting some sort of parasite or something that makes him sick. And so he has a really bad night. And then even the next day, on and off, he tries to eat stuff. He gets sick again, gets feverish. It's really rough. And so they go through days of this, and nobody's coming for them. And they have no way. They don't have any. They're not married. Neither of them is married. They have no close relatives. No one knows they're there. So they're running out of their provisions. And what are they going to do? So he's been getting sick on and off, and he explains to her. He goes to take his shirt off after having been, cold and everything, tries to dry it off. He's got a scar. He was in Korea with a special group, an intelligence group. He was what they called a swimmer that would swim through the flooded torpedo tubes of subs to bring special secret messages to people inland in Korea. And they did this in Vietnam. And so he tells her about how he got the scar, which is that this intelligence group he was with, the leader of it, ended up killing a local kid in the sort of the woods behind his house after he killed the kid's dog. And the kid put up a fight. He had a hatchet and happened to hit this guy, Paul. But, Paul wasn't responsible, but he didn't stop it. And so he has a lot of guilt. And as he goes through his fevers, you sort of get a sense that he's like experiencing stuff like that. He's thinking about that sort of thing. And so eventually they're forced, after a number of days, they're forced to have to eat worms. And they go to try to dig them up, and he's still getting sick. And she notices in one of the snow squalls that on the other side of the lake is in the woods, someone is moving. And the writing on the wall matches the writing of a man named Davis, who was fired from the Forestry Service just a couple weeks before because he was approaching some of the women and one of the women's daughters in very uncouth ways. And so they get rid of him. And now they realize it's this guy who broke into this place and wrote this stuff on the wall. And he has manipulated the documents to show that there's nothing on the schedule that even shows these people are supposed to be there. He's eliminated all that. So nobody knows that they're there. They don't know that she's taken the Jeep. They don't know anything. And they're stuck there. And now they think they've seen this guy watching them. So she's determined that they're going to beat this guy, Davis. But they have no way to get off the island. And they've got to survive. And this guy, Paul, keeps getting sick. So we're going to go to that now as we see them going to eat the worms for the first time. Okay, so this is Tower, my novella, and we're on page 58 right now. So he accepts one of the mugs. She says, what do we do? He says, it's fairly straightforward. Before you cook them, you have to pop out the poop. He lifted one from the mug, a curling wretch of a creature that desperately squirmed to get free. 4 inches of wriggling, oil-like, simple-minded life that knew it was under attack. Paul held the head between his left index finger and thumb and used his corresponding right fingers to pinch just below it, popping something at the tail, then sliding his still pressing digits down and forcing out the bile, blood, and feces of the worm in a foul-smelling spray that spattered near the fire on the floor. If we cook it now, either boil or just let it sizzle in a bare mug, it'll turn gray and we can eat it. Is that how the Confederate soldiers did it in the northern prison camps? He plopped the worm into another empty mug. I doubt they had the luxury to actually cook anything, he offered. Then suddenly he winced. His eyes clamped shut. He took a moment to hold his breath, seemed to gather himself, and finally reopened them. You okay? He nodded. They killed and cleaned each night crawler, a total of 11, as she had thought, and plopped them into a mug of water, setting that on the floor right beside the fire and embers. And as the darkness discolored their surroundings like a bruise, they watched and waited. As if utterly spent, Paul leaned sideways against one of the filing cabinets, closing his eyes and warding away the world. And Caroline stirred the grisly contents with a pencil. It was disgusting, revolting. The worms were turning the water into a sludgy brown stew that stank like mud and minstrel blood. The steam that began to rise out of the mug was like something from a grim tale, a witch's brew, the stench of which could be enough to knock out any unwitting child. And for a moment, after they had split their shares of the ugly repast and settled back with mug and plastic fork and pencil in hand, they both fell into an extended period of inaction, both staring at the vermes they had killed, had been reduced to consuming. Caroline's eyes seemed to absorb more than the worms and the mug, more than the darkness around them that was only warded to a slight degree by the transitory, flickering light of their tiny fire. She looked down into a deep, deep abyss, a hole created by some sort of evil, like the work of nightmare witches she had encountered in her sleep as a child. There brooded shadows and mines of shadow. Somehow the very cavernous subterranean air possessed something and mocked her. She felt nausea and hunger, simultaneously revolting and commanding herself to, simultaneously feeling revolted and commanding herself to poke the first worm and put it in her mouth. And she held the pencil, searching for a way to gather strength and lose her sense of revulsion. It was a matter of survival. Knowing that helped. It also was a way to fight back, to be able to see and study undisturbed the process of nature. Just going to do one thing. She tore her gaze off the distant recesses of the mug and looked at Paul, who held his fork and the worms stuck to its prongs. I was thinking of a book. His voice was different. It was lachrymose. It was lacking hope now. And when he spoke again, it seemed as if he were addressing only himself. The Outermost House by Henry Beston. It's about his year on a nearly empty portion of Cape Cod and the ways nature spoke to him. He remembers, to be able to see and study undisturbed the processes of nature. I like better the old biblical phrase, mighty works. Well, this is an opportunity for which any man might feel reverent gratitude. He said, I read that as a kid, a few years after it was released in 1927, and it shaped my development. My worldview changed. It's the influence that actually made me want to work with nature. He stared at the dead worm, still hanging from the fork, then slid it into his mouth, grimacing, blinking, chewing. Grip. Caroline pierced one with the tip of the pencil. I brought a copy of the book with me in the service. set many of the passages to memory as we swam the Pacific in the subs. He lifted another worm with his fork, grimaced, and regarded Caroline, taking in her hands the pencil and the mug, as if expecting her to follow his lead. Then he stared into the mercurial shadows cast by the fire. And here at last, in this silence and isolation of winter, a whole region was mine, whose innermost natural life might shape itself to its ancient courses without the hindrance and interferences of man. No one came to kill, no one came to explore, no one even came to see. Earth, ocean, and sky, the triune unity of this coast, pursued each one their vast and mingled purposes, as untroubled by man as a planet on its course about the sun. She lifted the worm, held it before her as it dripped and let off steam in the dim coldness of the cell, and she placed it in her mouth. Paul's recitation of the Beston sentiment stayed with her as she felt the crawler's slippery, unnerving, stomach-challenging presence confront her senses. The words and images rang and flashed, and she imagined birds eating worms, fish sucking them into their guts, imagined the whole natural world packed into the single, slimy thing. She swallowed it whole and felt it travel down the course of her throat like a parasite, as if still alive and warm and curious about its new home. Fighting the need to gag, she stared into the mug and squinted. Defying the nausea, she suppressed her physical reflexes and the years of mental normalcy that told her what she had eaten, whispered that, contrary to logic, doing this was vile and unclean. She tried to see the rest of the limp load in a different fashion, not as bloated, blood-watered gray objects, but as life-sustaining meat. And she quickly plucked them up with her fingers, inserted the worms, focused on the fingers on her lips, and swallowed the meal down again, almost gagging as the water leaked from the corners of her lips, and the stench filled her nostrils like a heavy, unpardonable smog. For a moment, she nearly dropped the mug, seeing Paul retch, seeing him nod, then seeing him seize up, cough, clamp his mouth, turn, and vomit. In the weak light of the small campfire, he spit and coughed, and she moved on her knees to his side. "Hold on, Paul. I'll be okay," he hissed at the floor. And for quite a while, they were. They were wordless, getting through it, side by side, as Paul finished coughing. Then they slid back and leaned against the respective file cabinets, staring, steadying their breath, and facing off the formidable wall of fate that wanted to see them smash and give up. Neither of them bothered with the vomit that glistened in the limited light like a volcanic pool on a distant Icelandic fjord. "I need to sleep," he said, finally. "I don't know what's wrong, Caroline, because from what I know about it, this isn't exactly like having worms. It's like something else, but I can't figure it out." She nodded and watched him turn onto his right side and rest his grizzled head on the backpack. With his eyes closed, he said, "But listen, I want you to start thinking of ways you can get yourself off this rock. We've been here for 5 days, and without food, we don't stand a chance lasting another 2.5 weeks. He opened his eyes and locked them on her. "I know you feel it too. Something about this situation tells me that Davis has set things up. The others won't be coming here. They don't know, and they won't come here. He might even have created some fiction about us running off together, far away, absconded with money from the office. We have no idea what narrative he's woven. And this," he tapped his stomach, "it's uncontrollable. Maybe I'll improve. I don't know. But something tells me that something's off, that I'm not thinking right about why I keep losing my lunch and getting fevers." Paul, don't become fatalistic. No, I won't. But you need to start thinking about yourself. Whatever I start going through, if it gets worse, you can't see me as a burden. He extended his gloved right hand, and she took it in hers. Promise, he said. And Caroline silently nodded and closed her eyes. So that's what I've got on Tower. Hopefully that's good. Hopefully that's good little story for you there. Hopefully you're digging that. Should be done in a couple weeks. Got to get the time to do it. Hopefully that's good. And I've resisted doing some of the updates because, it only comes in little bits because I'm doing so much other stuff on the political side of things that it takes so much time out of the day that you can only write little bits. So I would like to maybe wait and just finish all the rest of the story off and just read it all for you. That would be fun. Might do that over a couple nights and then get ready to publish it. I think that would be good. Skunk Hollow, badass guard, best yet. Thanks, man. Yeah, things are getting serious, and it's going to be interesting. Thanks, Gray Wing. Thanks, man. Thank you so much, dude. I appreciate that. Over at Rumble. Thanks, you guys. And JB says, Tower is awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's interesting. You read some of this old stuff. Some of it's sort of simple. Some of it, really shines. And hopefully, the stuff I'm writing is good. I've always sort of been interested in writing ever since I was a kid. Obviously, I used to send those stories to Twilight Zone magazine and stuff. So, I sort of walk in that tradition. And especially when you get sick and, things that you used to be able to do very, very well, you're trying to find that you're still doing them. You try to find new ways to keep your alacrity and do it properly in honor of the people reading, in honor of the people who inspired you and your parents and things like that. And the story itself, the story that you're creating and yourself and God. And it's I think it's working. It is interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. And like I said, when I start the Liberty Conspiracy Publishing Company, one of the key things for that, the subtitle is going to be human to human contact or something like that, because I want people to know that it's by a human for a human and it's not by AI. It's a person sending a message through time. And, hopefully it's going to make a connection with you. So hopefully this will do it. It's going to be good in the end. So rather than draw things out, little bits and pieces, I'll stop there. I'll try to finish it off this week. We'll see what happens. I got to do something on Sunday and go down to Boston, cross my fingers I don't get sick. And we'll see how it goes. Thanks. All right. I better hit the road. Next time, we might read another short horror story and I'll scout one out, see how it goes, and maybe read a little H.P. Lovecraft, maybe do an Edgar Allan Poe. That could be good. Like I said, maybe Cask of Amontillado. I love that story. But I better leave you with a little something going away. So we're going to close up shop with, of course, the Outer Limits outro. We're going to go with, where is it? There it is, Outer Limits outro. So it's going to be quick. So I'll just remind you, if you want to support the show, don't forget, you can donate over at Rumble while we're going. You can support us that way. You can become a monthly supporter at Rumble, which is always very easy and very cool. It's not a large amount. If you want to go with a small amount, you can also do the same thing at my Substack. Inside Substack, you can subscribe. You can become a paid subscriber. You'll get the news notes every day, Monday through Friday. And at the audio post every night for the Liberty Conspiracy Show, which if you're watching this on BookTube, I do this Liberty Conspiracy Show Monday through Friday. But either way, if you like the BookTube stuff or former Star Trek writing fellow, head over to my Gardner Goldsmith Substack. You can support it there. And we're going to be doing a lot more talking about script writing. I'll show you the process of what we did at Star Trek Voyager, which was a lot of fun, a lot of pressure, but it was a lot of fun. And hopefully what we're doing here is going to be supportive. And I appreciate all of your great verbal assistance, sharing of the links, donations, and things like that. It's a very, very important thing, As you know, things are changing around my work circumstances as far as I can tell. So I'm going to have to concentrate more on Liberty Conspiracy and the publishing company and do a fundraiser for that to get that going. So we'll get serious about that. And again, that's going to take some time to get the giveaways for people and the prizes and levels and stuff like that. So that'll be cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll leave you with my old stomping grounds. Actually, this is the original Outer Limits. I was on the redo of the Outer Limits. So thanks. Have a great night. Remember all the websites. Share the links. Feel free to donate. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow for America Unplugged over on Rumble. God bless you all. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Have a good night. Bye.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the Outer Limits.